Hi, I'm Heather Clancy here in the GreenBiz studio with Evan Harvey, the head of sustainability for Nasdaq, the global exchange and technology platform for helping people declare their value, their market value. Evan, welcome.
Thank you.
We were talking before we went on air about the evolution of environmental, social, and governance reporting and declarations. You mentioned it a few years ago, just a few years ago. It was a very contentious issue. What are you seeing about the current mindset around ESG and the willingness among mainstream investors to hear more?
Well, I think I should be specific that it was a contentious argument in the United States. It wasn't necessarily a contentious argument overseas. Half of our market is essentially in the Nordics. So we've always had a slightly different conversation there about the value of some of these things. And mostly that's because there's a lot of government intervention, there's a lot of social programs, there's a lot of emphasis on collective responsibility that we don't necessarily have here organically in the US market. But I think that the legitimizing force here in America has been the rise of the ESG data, the value of the ESG data, and as we have teased out more correlations between what those metrics mean and actual measures of financial outperformance. This doesn't necessarily have to do with environmental greatness or with social engagement. It could be about risk and return. It can be about retention rates for talent. It can be about the relationship of training dollars to retention of employees over time. There are all kinds of positive economic correlations that ESG has given us a light into.
So which metrics are helping this maturation? You know, are there specific frameworks where there's been a lot of change in the last couple of years?
Well, I mean, I think that GRI is still the gold standard out there for most companies. It's the only framework that's written into stock exchange listing standards around the world. So that serves as a sort of baseline for a lot of reporting globally. But I think that in the environmental space in particular, we've seen a sea change in the quality and the quantity of reporting over the last 10 years. And I think we've seen a change in the methodology with things like the Task Force on Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, which takes tick-the-box carbon reporting and puts it in an entirely new realm where you're looking at risk forecasting, scenario planning. How is your company going to compete and win in a 1.5 degree world, a 2 degree world? How are you going to survive if you don't have the resources to make whatever widget it is you make? So it's forcing companies to think long term.
What about the SASB?
The SASB has always been an interesting test case because SASB and GRI are sometimes pitched as competitors, but they're really doing different things. GRI is looking at every company and asking for some baseline sustainability information. SASB is looking sector by sector and saying there are only 5, 6, 7 things that are key to your performance in this space that investors need to know about. There's also a different materiality threshold for both of them. GRI looks at financial impact, but also impact on social and environmental issues, whereas SASB has largely been relegated to financial impact.
Materiality is obviously a word that means very specific things. For U.S. companies, what should they know about that?
To me, it's the origin story for your sustainability journey. It is the part of the process that is often overlooked, but it's what gives you the greatest insight into where you can go. So really, materiality is just a complex set of stakeholder interviews, of asking all kinds of questions about the environmental, social, and corporate governance performance of your company. And the process is dependent on having a real diverse audience and having fulsome answers from those people, honest answers about what your company is or is not doing. Putting all that information together and creating what they call a materiality map where you're able to prioritize these issues in ways that make sense for the business. So you're not only running off and doing 50 sustainability things, you're looking at the 3 or 4 that have the most impact internally and externally and on the future of your business.
And what is Nasdaq hearing from mainstream investors about why this is important? What more do they need?
I think they want better data. I think they're concerned about the voluntary reporting model. I think that the lack of harmony between some of the frameworks has been problematic over time. But they are obviously teasing out value. They're teasing out correlations between some of these ESG performance metrics and other measures of economic goodness. You know, things like rates of return, not only that, but also cost of capital and lower insurance risk and enterprise risk management stats. So there are all kinds of things that companies want and are measurable financially that seem to be correlated with ESG performance.
So what final piece of advice would you give to companies about how they should respond?
Don't try to do everything. You're going to be besieged with more requests for information than you can possibly handle well. Pick the 3 or 4 channels that make the most sense for your company and do a materiality assessment. Get your head around what is important to your company. And even if you don't report that out, at least you have a better idea of how to manage that company.
Evan, thank you for being here and thank you for your insights.
Thank you.
Thank you for watching GreenBiz Studio.